Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Max Story.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. So today we made it up to Chapter 5 on my series where I'm focused on sharing with you about content from my wife Ria's book, The Ladder of Influence, 5 Steps for Climbing to the Next Level and Beyond. So today we're going to talk to you about Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is actually titled Climbing to the First Step. And I named this episode Emotions Steer You, Choices Determine You. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's like a key point that comes out of this chapter. So let's dive into this. So Ria says, no one can control you without your permission. The last time I talked to you about, you can't be offended. No one can offend you without your permission, basically is what I was saying. And here she's taking it, because the first step on the ladder of influence, as we talked about last time, is self-control. So what you got to understand here is no one can control you without your permission. And I'll tell you a story about this. I've shared with you numerous times about me having a short temper earlier in my life for a long, long time into my life, really until in 2008 when I discovered the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And we'll dive into that a little more. But I was telling that story. I was actually speaking up in Princeton, New Jersey to a paving company. And I was sharing about how I used to have such a short temper, bad temper. And Rhea always, whenever I share that from the stage, Rhea always says, I don't think they understand. You need to paint them a picture. And whenever she says that, I always say, all right, I can paint you a picture. Imagine a Chihuahua on acid with a machine gun, going crazy. Those little crazy little Chihuahua dogs, those things, they get out of hand sometimes, right? If you're familiar with them. And for whatever reason, I've always just thought of those crazy Chihuahuas on some kind of drug, go make them even crazier, and then with a machine gun. That's just a kind of a play on, my time in the Marines, being in the infantry and that sort of stuff. But most people get the picture. Whenever I say it, usually the audience laughs pretty strongly. But that's who I used to be. So I was telling that story, and I was teaching about the principle I shared with you last time between stimulus and response. Human beings have the freedom to pause and choose their response. And I talk about when I first heard Dr. Covey say that back in 2008, I was listening to it on my stereo in my car, and I had to hit the pause button, literally. Think about it, rewind it, think about it some more, play it again, stop it, rewind it, think about it again, over and over. It was very profound to me at that time. But I probably got it wrong that afternoon, and I probably got it wrong a whole lot more times. But every single time, I would reflect back on that. Because after he taught about between stimulus and response, human beings have the freedom to pause and choose their response. Once I finally let it play, he said that means we're response able. And if you've been listening a long time, you've heard me say this, but I always got to say it when it fits, because some people, this is the first time they're listening to this podcast. And anyway, you can't hear the good stuff too many times. So after I finally let it play, he says we're response able. Because we can pause and choose our response, it means we're response able. And then he says what that means is we're responsible. When you put those two words together, being response able means we're responsible. And I had to think on that. And then, in that moment, it took a few minutes of thinking, but in that moment of thinking, I realized that short temper didn't run in my family, like I always said. What run in my family was our inability to control ourselves, lack of control. That's what runs in the family. irresponsibility. Instead of being responsible, being responsible, irresponsibility is what runs in my family. And it runs in a lot of families. And those families tend to look out the window and blame the world and just say, that's just the way I am. I'm like that. My brother's like that. My father's like that. My mother's like that. My cousin's like that. Everybody's like that. That's just who we are. We can't help it. You can help it. If you had ability to make a choice, you can help it. And that's what Rhea's talking about here in this episode or in this chapter. She's talking about self-control at a deep level. So I was sharing this story and teaching about this in that conference room that day up in Princeton, New Jersey, and a guy named Larry comes walking up the aisle at the first break, pointing his finger at me, and he said, you should be a doctor. And I was like, why is that, Larry? First of all, I didn't know what he said, so I had to clarify. I was like, do what? He said, you should be a doctor. I was like, why should I be a doctor? He said, because what you just taught me, no doctor's ever taught me. And, I've been in trouble. I've been in prison, in and out of prison, in and out of a psychologist's office because of my anger problem, psychiatrist. He said, I've had some issues. He said, but what you taught me a minute ago is the thing that I've been needing to hear my whole life. And what I had shared was, after I shared what I've already shared with you on today's episode, I shared when everything clicked for me, when everything kind of fell into place relative to controlling my anger, was when I realized that what I used to say was people trying to push my buttons, people trying to flip my switch, and I let them do it. And I didn't realize I was always in control. But sometimes I got it right, just like you probably have gotten it right. Many times, whether it was on purpose or by accident, somebody's trying to flip your switch, get you fired up, get you angry, get you mad. You know what we say, somebody trying to make us mad. Whenever we get it right, we don't get mad. We always know what usually happens to the other person. They get mad. When I say this and teach this, and I'm speaking to audiences and I ask that question, when I say that, I say, whenever somebody's been trying to make you mad, but you got it right and you didn't get mad, what happened to them? Every time, many people in the audience say they got mad. And that's usually what happens. And when I started understanding that and thought about that, then I said, well, why do they get, I'm asking myself this back in the days when I was trying to figure this out, because that had provoked thought in me. That's what all my content's meant to do, provoke thought in you. So I said, why does the other person get mad? When they're trying to make me mad, I don't get mad. Why do they get mad? And then it finally dawned on me that when they're trying to make me mad, they want me to be mad. They're trying to control me, but I don't give them control. That means I got control. When they understand I've got control, they lose control because I'm in control. They don't have to, but because they ain't done the work that I'm talking to you about, when they're trying to control me and I don't allow them to control me, they get angry. That's their response, because they don't feel like they have control. They do of themselves, but they don't of me. And that's why we're talking about here self-control. So as soon as I figured out, whenever I was getting angry, whenever something would happen, especially if somebody was trying to make me angry, back in my early days, coworkers did that a lot. They was always instigating something, trying to get me angry, because they like to get me angry and then step back and watch. That was cheap entertainment. But as I thought about that, I realized whenever I'm getting angry, I'm handing over control of me to someone else on a silver platter. As soon as I chose to get angry, as soon as I chose to lose control of myself, I was allowing someone else to control me. And I ain't never wanted somebody to control me. That's why I used to get angry. I thought that's what I was supposed to do, to keep control. But then once I really realized it, what was actually happening, not what I thought was happening, it was easy for me to start controlling myself, because I did want somebody to control me. So if somebody's trying to make me angry and I say, okay, I'm going to play your game, and I get angry, I just handed them control. They just won because I got angry and that's what they wanted. But my values had to change, and I first had to decide I don't want to be angry. I don't want to have a short temper. I don't want to lose my temper. It doesn't matter if you ain't trying to increase your influence in a positive way. You just keep being however you want to be. But as I grew and I started to realize I want to have positive influence with people of high character, well, those kind of people value self-control. So then that's when I started trying to figure all this stuff out. Why does it matter? It don't matter if you don't care. I assume if you listen to this podcast, though, you care. Your values are either changing or have changed, or either you're just in alignment with self-control already and understand the value of it. But a lot of us out there don't. I had to learn it. For a lot of years, I didn't learn it. I was a bad example of self-control. I was totally out of control for many years of my life. But as soon as I figured that out, that's when I started not getting angry. It didn't take long, and I just didn't get angry anymore. Not outwardly angry. I may be on my pause button. I may be thinking about it. I may be wanting to do it, but it doesn't happen. So that's what we're talking about here. No one can control you without your permission. And if you're the kind of person, and most of us are, that don't like being controlled, make sure this sticks with you. The moment you lose your temper, the moment you get angry, you have handed control over to someone else. Someone's controlling you. I mean, if you wanted to be angry, you just be angry all the time, like 24/7, if that's what you wanted. I don't know if I've ever met anybody with a normal frame of mental capacity who just wants to be angry all the time. There might be a few people out there, but most of us are not like that. Something happens and we choose to be angry is usually what's going on. So whatever that is that's happening that causes us to choose to be angry, that's what's controlling us. If you want to have self-control, you got to master your anger, your temper. That's one thing. There's a lot of things. This is just a big thing that relates to my life. So Rhea says control of self is the key to a better life at home and at work. And I 100% can validate that. My professional life got better when I stopped getting angry and mad at the people I was working with. I stopped getting in trouble. And at home, my life got a lot better. My relationships got better. I've been with Rhea now. This year I'm recording this in 2025. I met her June 16th, 2000. So we're getting close to having a relationship for 25 years, and this year we'll celebrate 24 years of marriage because we got married a year later in October of 21, October 27th, 2021. But the reason I tell you that is that's my fourth marriage. My lack of ability to control myself in all kind of areas of my life was the reason I've been previously married those 3 times. I hope you don't think less of me. It's just the truth. But I got a track record now showing I've redeemed myself. I've turned the corner. I'm stable. Because Rhea, if you know Rhea, she's sharp. You ain't gonna hang around Rhea very long if you act like a fool. And fortunately, she grew with me because when she met me, I still was an idiot and acting like a fool. Not as bad as I had been previously, but I met her in 2000, and I didn't discover all the stuff I'm talking to you about until 2008. So from 2000 to 2008, I was just doing what I had always been doing, just slowly and not in a methodical way, but just the opposite, just happenstance. I was slowly just evolving and getting better as I grew up, so to speak, as I matured, but it was super slow. But as soon as I discovered this 2008, I launched like a rocket relative to self-control. That's why I share so much about this stuff all the time. It's why I share actually what I'm talking about now in so many episodes, because it just fits in a lot of places. And I still live in the world, and I meet a lot of people, and I know there's a whole lot of people that struggle with self-control. And as Rhea says, emotions steer you, choices determine you. That's so powerful. We talked, I believe it was last time, we talked about just a reminder, Andy Stanley, he said, your feelings can be terrible leaders. That's what he's talking about. When Rhea says emotions steer you, positive emotions can steer you in a positive way, but again, they can also get you out of whack. But those negative emotions are really, really strong relative to steering you. But the key word there is emotions steer you. They don't determine you. Choices determine you. And there's a quote I share sometimes from Myron Golden. When I read it, I just loved it, but it fits right here. And he's talking about victimhood. If you look out in society, there's a whole lot of people that want to be the victim. There's a whole lot of people that want to motivate and inspire people to be the victim. Those are the worst folks of all. Instead of teaching what I'm teaching, they teaching right the opposite. They teaching you everything that's wrong in your life is someone else's fault. That's the most ridiculous thing. But hey, if that's what you want to do, you got the choice to choose. You can make that choice to do that too. And there's a lot of people do that. They're the victim and they want everybody else to be the victim. So it makes them look right and feel good and all that sort of stuff. If that's what you want, you listen to the wrong stuff. You're reading the wrong stuff. I ain't here to help you be a victim. So Myron Golden said this about victimhood. He said, victimhood is made possible when we allow contributing factors to become determining factors. And what he's talking about is contributing factors. Say something happens. Pick whatever you want. Something happens. In Rhea's case, if you know her story. If you don't know her story, you need to go to Rhea, RIASTORY.com and look up the TEDx menu, TEDx, and watch her 7-minute TED talk. It's a video. And there's some of her books there that relate to her story. But she was sexually abused by her father from age 12 to 19. Extremely. I mean, you can't even imagine. Whatever you thinking, it was 100 times worse. You ain't even close. And he trafficked her to other men and just unbelievable stuff. She writes about it in her book. She shares a little bit in that video. But those were all of that happened to her, and it happened to her for 7 years. Those were contributing factors in her life. Those contributing factors led to some probably unbelievable and unimaginable emotions, probably that I can't even comprehend. And if that sort of thing has never happened to you, you might not be able to comprehend it either. But those were contributing factors. She didn't allow what happened to her to become determining factors. She understood, without ever reading this stuff, that her choices determined her, not her experiences, not what happened to her didn't determine her. Our response to what happens to us determines us. Our response to what happens to us is nothing more than a choice. So whenever you see these victims out there, and look in the mirror for yourself, don't play the victim card. Don't play the poor, pitiful me, all this, whatever happened to me. We've all had some stuff happen to us that wasn't great. Some stuff ain't bad as Rhea's. Some stuff is worse. You've had stuff happen to you already. Don't let those contributing factors, things that contributed to your emotions in your life, determine your life. That's a choice only you can make. I mean, there's people who had what happened to Rhea. One choice they had to make is drugs and alcohol. That's what a lot of people do. They have that bad of an experience in their life. It's a choice. Some people choose suicide, unfortunately. Some people choose to do what Rhea was doing when I met her, when it was happening. It was still happening to her when I met her. She was living life like it was not happening. And I didn't know about it for several months before I had a conversation with her about it because I suspected it. And then there's other people like Rhea, had that bad stuff happen to them, and they do what she's doing today. She's writing books about it. She's talking about it. She's made the video about it. She's trying to help other people who've had bad things happen to them in their life realize that ain't the end of their life. They got choices. They can go down the wrong road. They can go down the right road. It's up to them. Rhea goes on to say, You can always choose to be proactive and respond to anything that happens to you in life based on what you value most and what you feel will move you forward. And when you understand Rhea's story, it's one reason I shared a bit of it with you here. If you're reading a book, I don't think in this book she shares too much about her personal story. She may not share any. I can't remember. Some books she talks about it, some books she doesn't talk about it. But I want to make sure when you're listening to this that you understand where she came from. When you understand what she went through and how she pulled herself out of that and who she is today, everything she writes about and talks about has a much, much deeper meaning. And when she's writing here talking about self-control, she ain't writing about it because she read it in the book. She's writing about it because she learned it in her own life and learned the value of it and has applied it, these principles that she's teaching, to herself. And I know too, because I've done the same thing. I didn't have to overcome what happened to me in that sense. I had to just overcome who I was as a person. And I blamed people for making me that way. I blamed society. I blamed my environment. I blamed all kind of stuff. Myron Golden also says blame is the most popular excuse. I made so many excuses for who I was, but as soon as I started understanding what Rhea's talking about on this first step, self-control, everything else started changing. And we're going to dive into that, but we got some more chapters to go in as we talk about self-control. But Rhea's got something in the book. You can't see it. It's an illustration. It's a picture, but I'm going to kind of try to paint you the picture. She calls it the choice cycle. So just imagine a circle cut into five pieces, like a pizza, but there's 5 pieces. And each one of those pieces is labeled. And basically there's an arrow going from one piece to the next to the next. So you're making a circle. You go round and around and around in this choice cycle. So she starts out, or I'm going to start out as I explain it. Well, let me just tell you the 5 pieces first. Stimulus is one, beliefs is another, feelings is another, choices is another, and the impact on circumstances is another. So I'm going to paint you that picture. We're going to start out with stimulus. Stimulus, I talked about that already. Between stimulus and response, we have the freedom to pause and choose our response. So she's saying here in the choice cycle, there's a stimulus in our life, whatever that is, something happens. And then that leads you to the next piece of the pie, or the next part of the choice cycle, I should say, relative to this description. And that next piece is beliefs. So something happens, and then who you are, your values, your beliefs, that leads you to thoughts. The stimulus provokes thoughts, and you tell yourself a story based on your beliefs. Just like I used to do. Do I believe I'm responsible, or do I believe somebody else is responsible? Just that one belief right there is going to cause you to have different thoughts and tell yourself a different story. That's why you want to master climbing this ladder of influence. You want to master life. One of your beliefs has to be, I'm responsible. Can't be someone else is responsible. That's blaming other people. But you can. Either way, stimulus, something happens that your beliefs determine your thoughts and the story you tell yourself. Those beliefs lead to the next section of the choice cycle, the next piece of the pie, which is feelings. So something happens. You have some thoughts. You tell yourself a story. Those thoughts and that story influence your feelings. So stimulus leads you to your thoughts and stories that are based on your beliefs, which cause you to have feelings. And these are instinctive emotions that's going to happen based on the thoughts and the stories that you tell yourself. And those feelings, they're going to lead you to the 4th slice of the pie, or the 4th component in the choice cycle. You're just going in a circle. You're going around this circle here. Those feelings, those emotions are going to lead to your actions and your behaviors. And she calls that choices, because that's what that is. Your actions and your behaviors are choices. So something happened, a stimulus. You tell yourself a story and have some thoughts based on your beliefs, which leads to your feelings, which lead to your choices, the actions and behaviors. Those choices determine your circumstances. They impact your circumstances relative to what Rhea says here in the choice cycle. And then you find yourself in this new set of circumstances, living there. And then guess what happens? Something happens. There's another stimulus. That leads to thoughts and stories that you tell yourself. That leads to feelings and emotions. That causes you to make certain choices. But you have free will, so you choose what you're going to do. No matter what feelings you have, like you can be angry and you can just be quiet. That's a choice. You can be angry and be mad, outwardly angry. You punch a hole in the wall. That's a choice. Whatever choice you make, though, it's going to have an impact on your circumstances. And then the cycle just starts over and over. So that's what she's trying to describe here. Stimulus, beliefs, feelings, choices, impact on circumstances. Here comes another stimulus. You just start over. Round and round you go through life. But that part about choices, that's where everything takes a turn for the better or a turn for the worse. And you have freedom to choose your response in any situation. And you're doing it every single time something happens, you respond. No matter what it is, you're exercising that free will that you have. But that free will, the way you exercise it, the choices you make, determine your direction in life. All these little choices add up to big problems or big success. And Rhea says anything compounded over time will have a big impact. So it's crucial for us to be intentional with our values, thoughts, decisions, choices, words, actions. That's what she has to say. She says practice leads to improvement. If you're doing the right practice, if you're making the wrong practice, you get worse. But if it's the right practice, and that's what she's talking about here, because she's teaching you what to do right here in this book, and I'm sharing it with you through this podcast. You practice the stuff I'm teaching you and she's teaching you. Practice don't make you perfect, but it leads to improvement. Continuous improvement. Non-stop. Dr. Covey calls it sharpening the saw. Getting better. Small changes for the better. Travis Bradberry had this to say, and I'll close with this quote. He says, emotional self-control is a result of hard work, not an inherent skill. You got to work hard, in other words, is what he's saying, on becoming the person that Rhea's describing and I'm describing, on becoming the person that she actually has become, and becoming the person that I feel like I've become relative to self-control. I'm living in a different kind of world than I used to be living in. And it's because I've been doing this hard work that Travis Bradberry is talking about. I've been working on this choice cycle that Rhea talked about and I described to you a minute ago. Good thing about life is you get to choose who you want to be and how you want to be as you go through this life. The better you get, the more positive impact you're going to have on the world. The better your relationship's going to be at home and at work. Your life's going to get better. If you want to make more money, you're going to make more money. You want to make a bigger difference, you're going to make a bigger difference. Hope you got some value out of today's episode. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.